water isn't real. Well, most of it is, but not all of it is. In America, it's kind of made up, but not all of it. But a really important chunk of it is. And that's a bit of a problem, because without water, we don't have the things we love, like food and nature and showers. Fortunately, there are things being done about it. But let me explain by starting at the very, very beginning. And I'm afraid it kind of starts with you, California.
The problem started in the 1920s, when California was going through a bit of a boom. It was making a lot of money from farming. It had 3 major cities, including one for churning out newfangled motion pictures. In the space of 20 years, its population doubled.
And none of it would have been possible without that. Well, not that, we're in England, but a river.
Specifically, the Colorado River, nearly 1,500 miles long. It and its tributaries flow through Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, and Arizona, and it goes on into Mexico. Water from the Colorado River was like rocket fuel for California, turning it into the fastest growing state in the western United States. California was so addicted to Colorado water that they even dug a canal to divert more water into the state.
There was no rules stopping them doing this, and so the other states took a look at what California was doing and thought, nah.
The other states were worried that California might use a kind of legal trick to claim that because they were using the river the most, that it belongs to them. It's called prior appropriation. It's like a legal way of calling shotgun. So to prevent that ever happening, all 7 states got into a room together and came up with an agreement called the 1922 Colorado River Compact. Now this compact did something that no one had ever done before. What they did was they got a great big pen and they put it just about here and made a mark just there. The river was now officially cut in 2. The top half was called the Upper Basin and consisted of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. The bottom half was the Lower Basin with Arizona, Nevada, and California. And they agreed that each basin would get half the water, which they measured to be 15 million acre-feet, so 7.5 each. So because of California's insatiable thirst for water, the river was split in 2. And soon after, every single state had their own allocation of Colorado River water written into law. This was a great time for the upper and lower basin. Cities kept growing, so more dams were built, including the mighty Hoover Dam. New farms were popping up, meaning more diversions were dug to get water to them. Then Silicon Valley turned up, so river water was needed for cooling servers. And now AI compounds that fact, calling on more and more and more and more and more water. And this whole crazy system somehow worked. For a while. In 2021, Arizona and Nevada had to cut their water supply because for the first time ever, a shortage was declared in the lower basin.
A shortage means that a lot of farms had to heavily reduce their water use, especially here in Arizona, because they have junior rights to the water than California.
But that's a different story.
The crops that Arizona is famous for, like alfalfa, were in shorter supply. So alfalfa hay became more expensive, feeding cows became more expensive, and the price of beef shot up. Arizona's climate makes it America's key supplier of green vegetables in the winter, so those prices shot up. And that's before we get to the damage to the habitats along the river that have all but shriveled and died because the Colorado River doesn't even reach the ocean anymore. Somehow a large portion of the Colorado River seems to have disappeared into thin air.
Part of the problem is climate change. But the big issue here is that 20% of the Colorado River is made up, and it started with a mistake.
Let's go back to 1922 and that 15 million acre-feet of water. Now, the people who measured it did an accurate job, but that was an unusually wet period for the Colorado River. These days, the river doesn't actually meet that target even half the time. In fact, in the last 20 years, the Colorado has only output an average of 12.5 million acre-feet of water, not 15. But, and this is the important bit, the lower basin has still been taking its legally entitled 7.5 million acre-feet of water. And this is how they did it.
This is a chart of water produced by the Colorado River every year since 1921. Now, as you can see, some years it doesn't quite reach its target of 15 million acre-feet, but other years it goes over. Now, when it goes over, that excess water is stored in Lake Powell and Lake Mead.
So in the good years, the extra water is saved, so they can use it in the dry years. And this worked well for a while too, but then it didn't. Since 2001, the Colorado River has had an unprecedented drought, with water levels way below normal, so that reserve of water has been dwindling. In the face of 2 decades of water shortage, the lower basin has still been taking their allocated 7.5 million acre-feet of water until there's nothing left to take.
Lake Mead is down to 1/3 of capacity. Lake Powell is down to 1/4. If the water level gets much lower, then it won't be high enough to pass through the gates in the dams. They call that Deadpool.
So soon people are going to start turning on their taps and nothing will come out unless someone does something. And they did do something. In 2023, the lower basin states came up with a proposal that all 7 states would reduce their water consumption by a certain percentage. But the upper basin states said, as the French also say, no.
In fact, as far as it's concerned, this whole mess is very much a lower basin problem, which might seem churlish, but to understand their point of view, let's look back at our high school water cycle. 85% of the upper basin's water comes from snowmelt in the mountains. Now, they don't have massive reservoirs to store excess water, so they only have what Mother Nature sends them, good years and bad years.
The lower basin, on the other hand, can rely on Lake Powell and Lake Mead to release more water when it's needed. The lead negotiator for the state of Colorado summed it up best. We're being asked to solve a problem we didn't create with water we don't have.
So now they're at an impasse with no sign of anyone backing down. The problem is the upper basin has the key advantage in that they get the water first. There's nothing the lower basin can do about it except fight it in the courts. What we do know is if they don't come up with a deal soon, then the federal government will have to intervene. Wisdom is that they'll probably impose a lot of cuts on the lower basin.
More cuts means prices go up and further destruction of the natural habitats. But maybe it doesn't have to be this way. I know it all sounds doom and gloom, but trust me, it's not. Some farmers have seen the writing on the wall for a very long time, and they've been preparing for a world in which they keep farming, but using less Colorado River water. A game changer is drip irrigation. This is a process where, instead of sprinklers spraying water all over fields, with a bunch of it evaporating before it even hits the ground, drip irrigation uses hoses with tiny holes to deliver just enough water to the plant's roots. But these do pose an obstacle when ploughing and harvesting. Another solution is installing solar panels on cultivated land. It's called agrivoltaics. The idea is that the panels shade the crops a bit, which reduces the amount of water they lose to heat. And the panels, of course, create electricity, which generates another income. These ideas are great, but they do rely on farmers investing in very expensive infrastructure. So what is the government doing except bickering? Well, there is one solution: sewage water. Yep, the stuff we pour, drain and flush is an excellent source of water for crops, if you treat it properly. The Bureau of Reclamation has invested $200 million into treating wastewater in Arizona and Utah, so some of that Colorado water will now be used twice. Now, these solutions don't work for everybody, but they do offer something which is easy to overlook: hope. So yes, a lot of the water we expected from the Colorado River doesn't actually exist. The truth is, the upper and lower basins are going to have to adapt to a new world with a little bit less Colorado River water. Fortunately, while the states argue amongst themselves, there is light at the end of the tunnel.